Laura Ingraham smirked, thinking she had Jasmine Crockett cornered. But within seconds that smirk vanished. What started as a hit job on Fox News turned into a televised reckoning, live and unedited. With one folder and one sentence, Crockett flipped the script. What did she reveal on air that left even Ingraham speechless, and America reeling? Before we get to this explosive moment, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe truth still matters, hit subscribe. We've got another jaw-dropping story coming tomorrow. The camera cut back from commercial. The lights dimmed just slightly, enough to signal that something serious was about to unfold. On one side of the table sat Laura Ingraham, face sharp, voice primed to pounce. On the other, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, calm, composed, and holding something in her lap. A thick folder, sealed shut. Laura leaned forward first. "Congresswoman Crockett, you've made quite a name for yourself attacking people like me. Let's see how you hold up when the questions come your way." Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she turned toward the camera, slowly and deliberately, and said, "This is what accountability looks like, even for you, Laura." There was a moment of stillness. Even the studio crew froze. Crockett placed the folder on the desk, slid it across the table, and waited. Laura's eyes dropped to the cover. Her smile faded. "You're not the only one who can do research," Crockett added, her voice unwavering. "But the difference is, I brought facts." The silence from the live audience was deafening. No laughter, no applause. Just an electric, growing sense that something seismic was about to happen. But this wasn't how the segment was supposed to go. Laura Ingraham had built a career on controlling the conversation, on steamrolling her guests and editing around any stumbles. But this moment wasn't scripted, and it wasn't going away. The folder was full of documents, the cameras were live, and Jasmine Crockett had come armed with truth. What began as an ambush was now unraveling in real time. A Fox News host cornered on her own show by a congresswoman she thought she could humiliate. And in less than 30 seconds, the tables had turned. Before she ever entered the halls of Congress, Jasmine Crockett built her name in courtrooms where justice felt like a gamble. As a civil rights attorney in Texas, she fought for people the system tried to forget. Wrongfully arrested protesters, abused tenants, and over-policed communities. Her power wasn't volume, it was preparation. Every case began with timelines, discovery, and a plan to withstand pressure when it arrived. Judges noticed. Juries noticed. Opponents learned that interrupting her did nothing except slow their own defeat. She studied facts until they sang, mapped arguments like chess, and treated every hearing as a sworn obligation to the people who trusted her. That discipline followed her into public life. When she ran for Congress, she didn't promise fireworks. She promised receipts. Voters recognized steadiness. In a lout era, they chose a lawyer who built cases, not a performer who built clips. The lesson that guided her campaign still guides her today. Credibility is proof under bright lights. She speaks plainly but never casually, grounding every claim in something verifiable. It is why allies rely on her in chaotic moments, and why adversaries try to bait her into losing control. On Capitol Hill, that steadiness became weapon and shield. She arrived to hearings with binders tabbed by claims, exhibits, and likely evasions. When grandstanders barked, she kept her tone even and returned to the record. When witnesses dodged, she narrowed the question until only truth or silence remained. Staffers tell new hires the rules she repeats before every appearance. Facts first, pace second, tone last. Her restraint is not passivity, it is strategy. She knows outrage evaporates, but documentation survives. Television required a different kind of endurance, and she learned that too. She had been cut off, misquoted, framed by chyrons designed to shrink her into a caricature. Each time she made notes, revised her openings, and practiced closing sentences that could cut through crosstalk. The goal was never to win a viral moment. The goal was to anchor viewers in reality, even if the segment tried to drift. So, when the Ingraham angle called, Crockett treated the booking like a deposition. She studied segments, cataloged interruptions, and pulled public filings on sponsors. She drafted questions for herself in case the host refused to ask them. Then she packed a folder. Laura Ingraham didn't dominate primetime by playing nice. She mastered the spectacle of confrontation. With a clipped cadence, an arched eyebrow, and a producer's ear for conflict, she turned interviews into jousts and guests into props. The show's rhythm became familiar, a welcoming preamble, a leading clip, an interrupting crossfire, and a closing monologue that framed the battle as victory. It wasn't dialogue, it was design. Her brand thrived on choosing opponents who could be cast as symbols, academics painted as elitists, activists framed as radicals, and especially young women of color reduced to caricatures for a punchy segment. She mocked accents, belittled credentials, and sliced quotes until they served the narrative. Viewers tuned in for dominance, not discovery, and the metrics rewarded escalation. Inside the building, people joked about Laura's kill list, a mental roster of progressives she aimed to embarrass on live television, preferably in segments timed for maximum online replay. Appearance insulated her. Ratings validated instincts. Producers stacked segments to guarantee advantage. Graphics cued, chyrons sharpened, research packets filtered for exploitable lines. Interruptions weren't accidents, they were checkpoints. If a guest began to reset the frame, the volume rose, the clock tightened, and the conversation snapped back to Laura's terms. She had spent years perfecting this machinery, and it rarely misfired. Then, Jasmine Crockett started appearing in her rundowns. Calm, precise, unflustered under pressure, Crockett didn't fit the mold of a convenient foil. She answered quickly, referenced sources, and refused to chase emotional bait. Laura answered with a series of remote segments attacking Crockett's tone, positioning her as angry, extreme, and unserious. But those jabs landed softly. Crockett kept rising, and the audience noticed. So the plan shifted. Bring her into the studio and run the classic ambush. Open with a clipped quote, press with a compound question, interrupt the rebuttal, then roll a graphic that implies hypocrisy. Force haste, manufacture heat, capture the stumble. Laura prepped for that play and expected the usual result. What she didn't expect was discipline that disarmed the format. Crockett studied prior segments, mapped the interruptions, and prepared evidence to anchor every answer. When Laura reached for the familiar levers, the room didn't move. The machinery met resistance, and for the first time in a long while, Laura looked unprepared. For once, the script faltered, and control slipped from her hands entirely. The lights were hot, the cameras rolled. Laura Ingraham leaned forward with her usual half-smile, already holding her highlighter-marked cue cards. She didn't waste time. After a rehearsed welcome and feigned curiosity, she jumped in. "Congresswoman, just last week you said, quote, Republicans don't care if Americans suffer as long as they stay in power. That's a pretty extreme accusation, isn't it?" The quote wasn't new, but it wasn't full either. It was clipped from a floor speech about healthcare access, cut off right before Crockett cited specific GOP votes that blocked insulin price caps and maternal care funding. Laura knew that. She just didn't care. Crockett glanced at her, unfazed. "Do you know what context is, Laura?" A murmur swept through the live audience. Ingraham's eyes narrowed. "Are you denying you said it?" "I'm saying that you cherry-picked a sentence from a broader critique about policy cruelty," Crockett replied, leaning slightly forward. "Let me ask you something. Did you bother to include the part about maternal mortality rates in Texas? Or about the GOP votes that gutted the Affordable Care Act's protections for people with pre-existing conditions?" Laura tried to speak, but Crockett continued, unshaken. "See, this is what happens when you focus on optics over substance. You want a soundbite. I'm offering a record. That wasn't how this was supposed to go." Ingraham blinked, just once, trying to reset. "The American people want accountability." "And I'm here to give it," Crockett shot back. "But accountability doesn't come from framing. It comes from facts." There was a flicker of hesitation behind Ingraham's eyes. The live audience, largely conservative-leaning, had gone unusually still. Some leaned in, as if sensing the rhythm shifting. For a brief moment, the power in the room tilted. Laura shuffled her cards, trying to regain footing. "We'll get to the policies, Congresswoman. But first—" Crockett nodded calmly. "By all means, let's get to all of it." Laura Ingraham wasn't used to this. Guests usually squirmed by now, or at least looked defensive. But Jasmine Crockett was still calm, arms relaxed, gaze locked forward. That composure was unsettling, and it forced Laura to do what she rarely had to: abandon the cards and start improvising. "Sir, Congresswoman," Laura said, voice clipped, "do you think the government should dictate how people run their lives? Because that's what your policies suggest." Crockett smiled politely. "You mean like banning books? Or controlling what history can be taught? Or legislating who gets to vote? Because I agree. Those are forms of government overreach. And guess who's pushing them?" There was no pause. Crockett didn't blink. She waited, and the silence that followed was heavier than any soundbite. Laura interrupted, trying to cut the rhythm. "No, I'm asking about your support for spending bills that—" "Let's talk about your party's role in silencing truth," Crockett said, voice calm but firm. "Let's talk about state houses that ban diversity training, libraries that remove civil rights texts, and networks that push conspiracy theories while claiming to defend free speech." Ingraham shifted in her seat. "No one here is banning anything." Crockett raised an eyebrow. "Texas banned over 800 books last year, many about Black history and LGBTQ families. That's not a debate. That's a record. And it's public." Another murmur from the audience. This wasn't going to plan. Laura reached for her usual fallback: interrupt and redirect. "This isn't about Texas. This is about your voting record. My record is public. Yours is hidden behind commercial breaks and pre-cut segments," Crockett said. "If you want to talk about records, let's do it transparently. Right here." Laura hesitated. For the first time, she was reacting instead of controlling. Her producers buzzed in her ear, but her next line landed clumsily. "You know, I bring people here to have honest conversations. And yet you keep interrupting the ones who come with facts," Crockett said, voice even lower now, more precise. Ingraham forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The audience noticed, and in the control room, someone hovered over the delay button. This wasn't just off-screen. It was a collapse. Laura Ingraham sat upright, gripping her pen tighter than before. She gave a small, forced laugh, then turned toward the camera. "We give everyone a platform here, even the ones who clearly come with an attitude." Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. "Laura, what I came with is the truth. What you call attitude is actually accuracy. Let's not confuse the two." The audience murmured again. Something had shifted. This wasn't the usual Fox News back and forth. This was surgical. Crockett wasn't raising her voice or dodging the questions. She was answering them too well. And that precision was starting to unnerve the host. Ingraham tried once more to assert control. "You keep talking about misinformation and suppression, but don't you think your party is guilty of the same? Are you really in a position to claim the moral high ground?" Crockett placed her hands neatly on the table. "I don't claim a high ground. I claim the documented ground. You're welcome to join me on it any time." Ingraham scoffed, attempting to pivot. "This is political theater, and frankly, it's getting old." "No, Laura," Crockett replied. "What's getting old is pretending that ambush journalism is actual journalism. What's getting old is treating misinformation as opinion. What's getting old is this format, designed to make viewers angry instead of informed." The control room began buzzing. Producers looked toward the stage manager. Someone hovered over the commercial cue. And then, without raising her voice, Jasmine Crockett delivered the line. "Next time you plan an ambush, Laura," she said slowly, "make sure your guest is less prepared than you." The room froze. The air thickened. Even the host's practiced expression faltered. Ingraham opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The audience sat motionless, stunned. The camera operator didn't move. He held the shot on Crockett, who remained perfectly still, her eyes steady, her presence unwavering. Someone in the studio whispered, "Oh my God." The producers missed the cue. There was no graphic, no music, no quick save, just silence. and a shattered narrative. Jasmine Crockett had walked into the lion's den, but now it was the lion who looked unsure. Jasmine Crockett didn't pause after delivering her now viral line. The energy in the room was thick, uncertain. Laura Ingraham sat stiffly, searching for her next move. But Crockett, calm as ever, reached beneath the table and pulled the folder fully into view. It was thick, tabbed, highlighted, prepared for exactly this moment. She unfastened the clasp, flipped it open, and extracted the first document. "You know, Laura," Crockett said, holding up the paper for the camera, "since we're pretending this show is about facts, let's start dealing in them." The first sheet was a printout of a FOIA response from the Department of Homeland Security. "This document," she began, "confirms that specifically, the Ingraham angle, was identified in an internal DHS memo on the proliferation of foreign-funded disinformation. Page 2 cites specific interviews aired on your platform, interviews which, according to national security officials, contained narratives originating from state person's propaganda operations." A low collective murmur swept through the audience. Crockett placed the paper flat on the table and pulled the next one, this time marked with 2 corporate logos and a stack of small font legal text. "This," she continued, "is a donor contract between a political media firm and a shadow pack with documented financial ties to foreign investment groups operating out of Cyprus and Dubai. The pack funded targeted ad campaigns, many of which were laundered through third-party outlets, some of which fed your broadcast content." Ingraham started to speak. "That's a ridiculous accusation." Crockett didn't let her finish. "It's not an accusation. It's a paper trail, one your network never disclosed. This contract shows not just the financial flow, but the timeline, strategically coinciding with your midterm election specials last year, the very episodes where you ran features attacking candidates like myself." She reached again, this time with a smaller document, an internal email, printed in grayscale with redaction bars across the top and a single block of yellow highlight across one damning sentence. This was sent between 2 Fox executives, marked internal only, 3 weeks before your first segment targeting me. It reads, quote, "Reinforce base viewership by spotlighting divisive progressive voices, focus on tone, not substance, target black female representatives for emotional engagement and contrast framing." The room shifted. That line hit like a slap. The live studio audience gasped. Even the production crew behind the glass began to stir. A camera operator suddenly moved in tighter, knowing something extraordinary was unfolding. Ingraham gritted her teeth. "You don't know the context of that email." "I know exactly what it means," Crockett replied, "because I've lived the result. That's not commentary. That's orchestration." She spread the 3 documents in front of her. FOIA record, foreign donor contract, internal memo. You built a platform pretending to defend the American people from disinformation. But what these documents show is that your show has knowingly amplified it. This isn't about politics anymore. This is about propaganda and accountability. For a brief second, Laura looked like she might call for a break, but the moment had already escaped her. Crockett had taken control, not just of the table, but of the narrative, and now the reversal was underway. Laura Ingraham tried to reset the tempo. She cleared her throat and leaned forward, forcing a smile. "Congresswoman, if you're suggesting that Fox News is part of some grand international conspiracy..." Jasmine Crockett cut in, calm as ever. "I'm not suggesting anything, Laura. I'm showing you signed documents, emails, government memos. This isn't speculation, it's traceable." Ingraham's smile faltered. She reached for her cue cards again, but the rhythm was gone. She tried to pivot. "Let's talk about your voting record, shall we? Your support for massive spending packages?" Crockett didn't blink. "Diversion won't save you, but I'm glad you brought up records." She reached back into the folder and pulled out a 4th page. It was folded in thirds, then opened neatly across the table. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words carried more weight now than shouting ever could. "This is a leaked memo from a production strategy session held by your executive team," she said, tapping the page with a single finger. "It's dated August 18th, just 2 months ago. It outlines target profiles for upcoming episodes. There's a line highlighted in red." She paused. Quote, "Focus energy on dismantling the credibility of young black women in Congress. Personalize segments. Isolate quotes. Shift framing from policy to emotional tone. Make it cultural." This time, there was no murmur, just stunned silence. Even the staffers in the wings stopped moving. The control room, watching everything on a slight delay, immediately recognized the danger. A producer's voice came through the host's earpiece. "We may need to cut. You're losing the room." Laura's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her eyes flicked toward the camera, then toward the glass. She reached again for control. "This is absurd. You're reading selectively." Crockett met her gaze. "You built your career dissecting selective edits. Don't try to hide behind that now." Ingraham looked down at the table. The memo sat there in full view. She tried again to speak, this time softer. "You don't understand the editorial process. These documents lack context." "The only context that matters," Crockett said, "is the harm they caused. You platformed conspiracy theorists. You aired segments designed to emotionally manipulate your audience. And you did it while sitting on information that your show was being fed by entities not even based in this country." Another voice came through Ingraham's earpiece. "We're live. Don't cut. Let her finish." The host froze, her hands folded tensely. She didn't speak again. Crockett sat back slightly, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. "You've gone after women like me because you thought we wouldn't fight back. You wanted a moment to clip, to mock, to push out as fuel for your audience. But you miscalculated. I didn't come here with talking points. I came with the truth, and it's unraveling everything you've tried to build." The air in the studio changed. Something irreversible had happened. Crockett wasn't just defending herself, she was indicting the structure that surrounded her. And Ingraham, for once, had nothing left to say. The documents lay spread across the table like evidence in a courtroom. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. She reached into her bag one last time, pulling out a small flash drive enclosed in a transparent plastic sleeve. She held it between her fingers, letting the studio lights catch it. "I figured," she said slowly, "that documents might not be enough for some viewers, so I brought audio." Laura Ingraham looked up sharply. Her composure cracked for the first time all night. "Excuse me?" "This," Crockett continued, "contains recorded audio from a recent production meeting. Your show's pre-taping strategy session. It was provided to my office by a whistleblower who no longer wanted to participate in what they called, quote, targeted narrative distortion. For political entertainment." The control room froze. A tech whispered to the line producer, "Is she serious?" Producers scrambled, their screens flickering between camera angles. This wasn't just political theater anymore. This was a full-on detonation. Crockett continued, her voice calm. "In the audio, a senior producer references specific guests as marks. They discuss scripting segment outcomes in advance. They talk about how to isolate minority lawmakers and frame them as volatile regardless of what's actually said during the interview." Laura's face drained of color. She leaned toward the table, voice lower now. "You're crossing into legally actionable territory." Crockett didn't flinch. "I'm reading a transcript that's already been vetted by counsel, and it's going public." Gasps rang out from the audience. Even longtime viewers could feel it. Something irreversible had happened. Ingram turned to the crew behind the glass. "We're done here." She pulled off her mic and stood up. The show was still live, but it didn't matter. She walked off the set, leaving her own program behind. Crockett remained seated, still calm, still in control. She looked directly into the main camera. "I came prepared. I came with truth. And I came for every viewer who has ever felt gaslit by a network that pretends to speak for them while working behind closed doors to do the opposite. The camera held on her face, unwavering. The silence in the studio was heavy, reverent, even. "I don't care what party you belong to," Crockett said. "If you're tired of being manipulated, tired of watching lies dressed up as journalism, then it's time to demand better. Starting now." The broadcast ended with no outro music, no closing monologue, just silence, and Crockett's words echoing into millions of homes. The internet didn't just react, it detonated. Within minutes of the live broadcast ending, clips of Jasmine Crockett's takedown flooded every platform. The most viral one, her final line to Ingraham about bringing better grammed, racked up over 2 million views on X in just under an hour. By the end of the night, the hashtag Crockett destroys Ingra trended globally. It wasn't just a TikTok was flooded with reaction videos. Users filmed themselves watching the exchange, gasping, cheering, and in some cases literally falling out of their chairs. Creators looped Crockett's calm delivery with subtitles like, "This is how you check a propagandist," while others broke down each document she presented, treating the segment like an unfolding true crime case. Instagram Reels stitched together shots of Laura Ingraham's expression with Crockett's confident responses. Edits with dramatic music flooded timelines. Reddit threads exploded with forensic-level analysis of the segment. One post titled "Jasmine Crockett Just Changed Cable News Forever" hit the front page within 3 hours. And in a rare show of bipartisan attention, even conservative-leaning YouTubers made content about the event, not to defend Ingraham, but to acknowledge she had finally met her match. What caught fire wasn't just the drama. It was the method. Crockett didn't yell. She didn't insult. She brought documentation. She stayed calm. She outmaneuvered a veteran host on her home turf, and millions of Americans recognized that for what it was, a complete narrative reversal on live television. News networks scrambled to respond. MSNBC replayed the segment in its entirety. CNN brought on media analysts to discuss the implications. Even ABC's Good Morning America calling it the most composed dismantling of a political media figure in modern memory. Meanwhile, Fox News stayed silent. No follow-up tweets, no post-show recap, no defense from Ingraham. The usual post-interview chatter was absent. Viewers noticed. Commentators noticed, and so did Fox News competitors. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win an argument, she broke the algorithm. By morning, the fallout had moved beyond social media. It was no longer just a cultural moment, it was a corporate crisis. 3 major advertisers, 2 tech giants and a pharmaceutical brand, announced they were pulling ad placements from the Ingram angle indefinitely. 7 more followed by the afternoon, citing concerns regarding editorial integrity and alignment with brand values. The financial hit was immediate. Stocks for Fox Corporation dipped nearly 4% by closing bell, triggered by investor unease and escalating public scrutiny. But the damage wasn't just financial, it was institutional. The documents Crockett presented on live television, along with the audio recordings she referenced, were verified within 24 hours by CNN, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Each outlet published its own breakdown of the leaked internal memos, revealing deliberate editorial strategies targeting progressive women of color for emotional engagement and audience manipulation. The most damning headline came from the Times, Fox News segment planning tied to foreign-funded disinformation sources. On Capitol Hill, the reaction was swift. Members of the House Oversight Committee issued formal requests for documentation from Fox News, seeking answers on donor affiliations, guest booking procedures, and editorial coordination with known political operatives. By day's end, a bipartisan group of lawmakers announced an inquiry into potential violations of FCC transparency regulations and foreign interference statutes. Crockett's office confirmed it would fully cooperate and had already submitted its compiled research to multiple agencies. Within Fox, internal chaos spilled into public view. Staffers leaked emails showing panic from senior producers, some calling the on-air collapse the worst live segment in network history. Anonymous insiders told journalists that confidence in Ingraham's future had fractured overnight. Several show staff reportedly requested reassignment. Others left altogether. Meanwhile, Crockett continued forward. She gave one live interview, brief, focused, sober in tone. "This was never about ratings or revenge," she said. "It was about accountability. The American people deserve transparency, especially from those who shape what they see and hear." For years, Ingraham had operated with near untouchable influence inside a fortress of spin. But now, that fortress was crumbling. Brick by brick, contract by contract, truth by truth. And the collapse had started with one folder and one woman's quiet refusal to back down. The lights hadn't dimmed yet. The cameras were still rolling. Laura Ingraham had left the set. But Jasmine Crockett remained seated, facing the lens with the same composure she carried from the first question to the last word. She looked directly into the camera. No smile, no smugness. Just, "This isn't about one interview," she said, voice low but resolute. "It's not about Laura. It's not about me. It's about truth in a time of lies. It's about power being accountable to the people, not protected by platforms that sell you outrage instead of answers." The studio was silent, save for the hum of equipment and the subtle sound of cameras still capturing every word. Crockett continued, her tone growing firmer. "There are networks in this country that have turned news into a weapon, that take fear, twist facts, and feed the public narratives designed to divide us. They call it opinion. But when opinion disguises itself as journalism, and when platforms protect misinformation because it sells, we all lose." She leaned forward slightly, eyes unwavering. "It's time to rethink who we trust. Time to ask harder questions about the information we consume and the motives behind those who deliver it. Are they informing you or manipulating you? Are they holding the powerful accountable, or are they just reading the script?" Her voice never rose, but every sentence struck like a hammer. "I came here because I believe the American people are smarter than they're given credit for. I came because facts still matter, because the truth still matters, and because democracy depends on citizens who demand better, not louder, not flashier, just better." Then she paused, just long enough to let it settle. "If you're tired of propaganda dressed as news, it's time to rise up. Not with violence, not with chaos, but with clarity, with questions, with the courage to walk away from lies and stand in the light." Her final words rang out clear, anchored in purpose. Democracy doesn't need more attack dogs, it needs watchdogs, and that starts with us. She stood up slowly, documents in hand, and exited the set, not with applause, but with the weight of a truth finally spoken in a place built to silence it. Check sources before sharing, support outlets that correct mistakes, demand transparency from advertisers and executives. Write your station, call your representatives, refuse the bait of outrage. Choose patience over panic. Choose facts over fury. Choose country over clicks. I'm asking you to start tonight, and start together. For every viewer betrayed before,